The FIA has once again dropped a bombshell on the teams as they announced a big set of changes to the Formula One regulations for 2025 that regulate driver cooling and the use of DRS, as well as amended regulations for 2026. These changes will have a major impact on the picking order in 2025 and could completely reorganize the field as we know it from 2026 onwards. Could we see some teams surprise us in 2025 like Aston Martin did last year? Or will we see McLaren and Ferrari back at the front? Following the FIA's World Motorsport Council in Rwanda, the expected inclusion of driver cooling, as indicated by new heat hazard restrictions, when race temperatures surpass a specific threshold, has been confirmed, coupled with more stricter DRS rules. As if overtaking wasn't easy enough, right? The revised regulations also state that a heat danger will be declared if the FIA's official weather radars indicate temperatures over 30.5 degrees Celsius, or when the race director calls for it before to an event. This will necessitate the teams providing their drivers with cooling systems, and the minimum weight will be raised by 5 kilograms for the entire weekend to compensate for the extra heft of driver equipment. Furthermore, the slot spacing for the rear wing between the two phases of the DRS have been altered, with the minimum space lowered, likely to prevent any efforts to recreate McLaren's mini DRS trick from 2024. This might result in McLaren falling down the grid due to their heavy reliance on their nifty mini DRS's trick over the season. This was a trick in which the wing slot gap was slightly widened on the straights to minimize drag, as seen on the rear wing of the two MCL38 cars at the Azerbaijan GP. The minimum gap has decreased from 10 to 15 millimeters to 9.4 to 13 millimeters, and with DRS open, the top barrier stays at 85 millimeters. The FIA has also tightened the regulations for DRS modes, specifying that there may only be 2 locations and that when DRS is turned off, the wing must be returned to the starting mode precisely as stipulated. These 2 changes will be the big ones the teams have to deal with immediately, and the DRS wing changes will for sure result in performance loss for some teams, as Ferrari, Mercedes, Alpine and others quickly tried to replicate McLaren's trick, only for it to be banned from now on. What do you think? Will this result in McLaren or another team losing performance in 2025? The changes have at least been welcomed by some teams, most notably Red Bull, who seem to have lost the most of their dominance this year. Christian Horner anticipates a massively close race at the front of the field in 2025, conceding that consistency will be critical as his team looks to recover from their loss of the Constructors' title. While Max Verstappen successfully defended the Drivers' title to become World Champion for the 4th year in a straight, McLaren defeated Red Bull in the Team's Championship, while Ferrari finished the season in 2nd place, leaving Red Bull down in 3rd, whilst its main driver dominated the others once again, at least according to his wins record this year. Reflecting on McLaren's victory at the season-ending Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, Horner said that the Woking team had deserved their victory. "Congratulations to McLaren, to all the men and women there," Horner said. "We know how hard it is to win a Constructors' World Championship and the dedication and effort that has to go into that, so to Zach, Brown and Andrea Stella, and their shareholders, but most of all, the men and women at McLaren, congratulations. They've been outstanding this year. They've had 2 drivers that have performed extremely well and were deserving victors in the end. I'm sure that we raised pulses and blood pressure at the start of the race with the moment with Oscar, when Verstappen collided with the Australian. But, yeah, they deserved that Constructors' Championship this year, despite the fact that we won more races, more sprint races. Obviously, collectively, we didn't put enough points on the board to defend that title, so very well done to them." After taking a commanding lead in the Constructors' standings early in the season, Red Bull fell behind as the season went due to Sergio Perez's problems and greater competition from competitors. When asked how difficult it will be for the team to elevate their game again in 2025, Horner said that the margins between the top 4 teams on the grid, Red Bull, McLaren, Ferrari, and Mercedes, will be razor thin. "I think if you looked at points since the summer break until before this race, Charles Leclerc was very slightly ahead in terms of individual points scored, so you can see it's going to be massively close next year, said the team's principal. You've got at least 4 teams that are going to be in contention in the last year of these regulations, of winning Grand Prix, so I think the biggest winner will be Formula One next year. Verstappen successfully defended his driver's title in 2024, but Horner anticipates a tight race between the top 4 teams in 2025. I think that it's going to be fine margins everywhere, and of course getting out the blocks as well is always imperative, but you can see it's such a long season that consistency will be key. And, despite their relative problems in 2024 compared to their supremacy in 2023, Horner feels Red Bull has much to be pleased of as they reflect on the year. It's certainly been a busy year, off track and on track, but I think what is the most important thing to reflect on this year is the way that the team has stuck together, has worked as a team, he said. And whilst Abu Dhabi didn't go our way, 1 week ago we won a big race in Qatar, and the 9 victories that we achieved across the season, with all those things that I just mentioned. If you weren't comparing it to 2023, when Red Bull won 21 out of 22 races, it's still a hell of a year. So to all the men and women back at Milton Keynes, who have worked crazy hours, they can be very proud of what they've achieved this year. What are your thoughts on that? Are you expecting to see the most thrilling and exciting season next year? But changes for 2025 isn't all the FIA announced, as for 2026, the regulations controlling the use of active aerodynamics, as well as the floor body proportions, have been fully defined. A number of minor adjustments to the aero package for 2026 have also been described. So, we can expect some close racing again in 2026 and beyond. At least that's what we're being sold on right now. With teams allowed to begin work on the 2026 chassis on the beginning of next month, the FIA is confirming the specifics of its first update to both the power unit and chassis regulations since 2014. F1 teams had issues about the first draft of the chassis regulations. Following more talks with the FIA, amendments to the rules were agreed upon, allowing teams more aerodynamic flexibility. The FIA released images showing some of the impacts of these changes. Compared to the original graphics released in June, the current edition has greater detail on the aerodynamically sensitive front wing end plates, but the main planes appear to be mostly unaltered. So, the active aero regulations now explicitly specify that there may be 2 impacted flaps on the front wing that must enter 2 separate modes, one for turning and one for straight line operation. This contains physical brakes to prevent the wing components from spinning beyond the appropriate amount. The FIA's previous renderings also reveal that tiny winglets may now be fitted to the outside of the front wing end plates. The rear wing is where the most noticeable modification shows. In comparison to the angular variant shown in the initial design, the more recent version is more similar to that found on today's cars. Unlike the original 2026 design, no DRS actuator is depicted, despite the fact that the revised regulations allow for movable aerodynamic features at the front and back of the car. While DRS currently only allowed for overtaking, drivers will be able to use their adjustable aerodynamics to improve straight-line speed at all times beginning in 2026. A new high-performance engine mode called manual override will be added to guarantee drivers continue to receive proximity-based overtaking assistance. Also, other restrictions for the rear wing have been changed. Before, teams were required to employ 3 components to make the rear wing, but this has been revised to up to 3, enabling 2-element rear wings to remain. This has also altered the active aerodynamics requirements to accommodate both 2 and 3-element wings, with everything except the bottom mainplane element able to be turned, meaning we could see teams employ a double DRS in 2026. While the new car's floors are intended to be less powerful than the existing versions, which teams have discovered to be prone to porpoising and bouncing, the new 2026 F1 car picture depicts a more aggressive design for the intakes at the front of the floor. In addition, the floor's scope has been expanded. A floor sidewall, as well as winglet and fence bodywork, have been developed to boost the downforce created by the new design. The FIA's most recent rendering of a possible 2026 car also shows a flatter wheel fairing design than the previous iteration, which was generally similar to those found on current cars. The bodywork around the wheels has also been updated, with deflectors and a debris guard added to the regulations, as well as amended wheel drum restrictions to accommodate the new features. The most major adjustments planned for 2026 are unaffected by the new guidelines. These include new power units that no longer use an MGU-H, but instead use a significantly more powerful MGU-K, resulting in electrical power accounting for about half of overall output. The new cars will be somewhat thinner than the present models, with smaller wheels and a lower minimum weight restriction. F1 teams applauded the FIA's decision to ease some of the 2026 restrictions. However, it remains to be seen if it will work as intended. What do you think? Will the 2026 produce what we're being sold on, or are there going to be major troubles once released? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below.